Heyo everybody, Haku here with my discussion video that I said I'd make for Mahou Shoujo Ikusei Keikaku, or Magical Girl Raising Project JOKERS. So yeah, I'm going to do an arc discussion here, probably not super duper long or anything. It's just that I said in my last video that, maybe I would take this week off to give me some extra time to work on an updated favorite characters video. And then towards the end of the video I decided instead of taking the week off I could just do a short discussion video to just talk about the arc a little bit. I got a couple of bullet points here but nothing too extensive. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about the arc and my thoughts on it a little bit. Mostly just my thoughts on it and all that. And the way I've decided to organize this, before I get into that, this week I'm doing this, next week I'll do the favorite characters video, the week after that I'm going to do my reactions to the character designs for the next arc, which is Aces I'm doing next, and then the week after that I'll start reading Aces. After Aces though, before I do Queens, I'm going to do both the second set of episodes and also Peaceful Days. And I know some people are going to be disappointed, oh, we have to wait so long to get to Queens, but nothing's been released after Queens so far, so I don't mind taking my time, because once I catch up, it's like, okay, I'm caught up, now I don't have any content to give you weekly anymore. So yeah, I'm just going to take my time with it, so we can still just enjoy the series weekly until we get word on the next arc being released or anything. But either way, as I was saying, the way I've decided to organize this video, instead of going through the arc part by part, because that would take forever and it would mostly just be me listing things that happened, I'm going to organize this how I organized a discussion video on the most recent Tower of God arc, which is I'll go through some negatives I think about it and some positives. Now the negatives for this, I only have 4 bullet points and I don't really consider any of the 4 of them very serious, so that's probably not going to be that much, but still I think it's good to break things down that way. As sort of an overarching my opinion of it, I think it's nowhere near Restart. I don't think anything I've read has been anywhere near Restart, but I would say that this is at least as good as Unmarked in my eyes. Maybe a little bit better, but it's hard to judge the two because they're two very different stories, and I kind of like that. There are things that Unmarked does super well that JOKERS doesn't really do very well, and then some things that Unmarked couldn't do very well because it's the first installment in the series that, being the 4th installment, JOKERS can do very well. So yeah, I don't know, I liked it. And then with Limited, I feel like Limited had a ton of issues. I'm not going to preach on Limited like I tend to do a lot, but even a lot of the issues that it had, I felt one of the positives about JOKERS is that in its epilogue things at the end of each chapter, talking about characters from past arcs, it kind of takes a lot of the things that weren't very good about Limited and helps with some of them. I mean, it doesn't help with all of them, and some of them are still really bad, but it definitely does help fix a lot of things, and one important thing in particular that I'll get to is kind of my last point. But yeah, let's start off talking about the negatives. I only have 4 bullet points here, and like I said, none of them are super serious. The first negative is one that I've gone around and I've seen some things that other people have posted, like their reviews of the arc. And in addition to that, I've talked to you all on Discord and on Twitter throughout this arc, and it seems like a lot of the negatives I'm seeing are kind of the same exact negatives that I myself feel. And the most common one that I saw everyone bring up is that some characters weren't really developed, and in particular people would always bring up Umbrain and Lady Proud. And that's the way I feel too. Umbrain and Lady Proud, like what a lot of people were saying, I agree with it. We didn't really get much into their relationship. We saw that they had some sort of deep connection to each other, but we never really explored it. And of course I assume tons of things like this are going to be talked about in episodes, but I haven't read episodes yet. And in addition to that, I'm just judging this arc by itself. So yeah, they weren't really developed. I feel like I would have liked to have seen more Kafuria, more Utakata, And just even the characters that were developed weren't developed as extensively as some of the ones in the first two arcs were, or even as some of the ones in Limited were. And Limited didn't do a very good job of this either, but I will say it's one of the few negatives. Now that kind of balances out, because one of the positives is that it does have some really great, really well developed characters, but the problem is that I like to view all 16 as main characters. We see from their perspectives. I like to sort of feel like they're at least somewhat balanced, but in this, some characters just really weren't developed. My second negative bullet point would be that some of the deaths seemed a bit empty and emotionless, where in the first two arcs, again, well, one of my biggest complaints about Limited is that some of the deaths were just really stupid and unnecessary, but in the first two arcs, every single death had a really specific purpose in the story. It was supposed to move these characters this way, or make these characters feel like this, or convince these characters to do this. Every death had a really solid, concrete, important reason, and there were a few here that they didn't really have a solid, concrete reason to die. The characters could have done what they were doing without them dying, or really it could have just been anyone dying. It wasn't them specifically playing a role in a story. So, yeah, some of the deaths just didn't really have that meaning, that emotion, that impact. Ones that I would bring up are Lady Proud's. Lady Proud just kind of died. Anyone could have died in Lady Proud's place. Her story wasn't particularly important or significant or special in any way. And I really liked Utakata, but Utakata's death, in the future, it kind of developed Filaru's character a little bit, but in general, it just kind of was a death that it just happened. Oh well. Some of the other deaths, I think, that weren't, I wouldn't call them bad, like the deaths of the servants, not really servants, the deaths of the prisoners, as Shufflin was restocking the deck. I think those could have been much, much more developed if they went a lot more into the psychology of the characters to make us feel a lot worse for them. They did that a little bit here and there, but sometimes they didn't. So that was kind of, sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't. Even the deaths that were a little emotional, I feel like the deaths could have been handled better this arc. So again, that's a negative that's not really that huge a deal to me. Third is probably the biggest negative and the one that is the biggest deal out of the four to me, and that's that Kafuriya's magical skill was wasted. Kafuriya's magical skill was so friggin' creative. It was such a smart writing device that could have been used in a million different ways to tell a million really cool stories, but we didn't get any of that. Kafuriya's magical skill never came into play at all, really, when her magical skill could have been a central focus. It could have been used to tell so many different really amazing stories, and it was just wasted. It was a really cool concept that nothing happened with. So I would say my biggest negative is that we didn't tell any stories using Kafuriya's magical skill. And then the fourth and last of my negatives, again, not really a big, huge one, was that Filaru's death was a bit unnecessary. I think it would have been better for Filaru to survive. That way we have at least one character surviving from the villains, one from the pure elements, Snow White obviously, one from the Mal School group, and then one from the Freelancer group. So I think it would have been better if Filaru would have survived to provide that lasting sort of member of the Freelancer group to carry on the will of the Freelancer group. Now her dying does develop, Deluge a bit more, because it makes it like, okay, Deluge has literally lost everything, suffered time and time again. Every time she thought she was okay, she suffers even more. So that helps with Deluge's story a bit, which is why it isn't like a total negative. But at the same time, I don't feel like it was necessary. Deluge already had that story going from losing all of the pure elements, so she didn't really need to lose Filaru, because she wasn't super, super connected to Filaru anyway. And yeah, I just think that Filaru probably should have lived in order to carry on the will of the Freelancer group. So her death being unnecessary, I think, was was the fourth negative. But again, none of those four are really super huge deals in comparison to all of the great things this arc gave us. So now let's talk about the positives a bit. To start off, one thing I like is that we still have a mystery going on that wasn't addressed in the end of the Doctor and the old lady. We know that the pure elements were the target of all these magical girls, but we don't really know who sent that text message. We don't really know who the old lady at the tea shop was that I thought was maybe the same old lady that was the Doctor. We don't know who the Doctor is, but we can assume that it's the same old lady that brought the pure elements together who wore the roses, so I thought that she was going to be Grimheart. But why would Grimheart need to try to sneak in and kidnap her own people that she could have just taken at any time? So it's probably not Grimheart. So again, we still have this mystery going on that hasn't really been solved. And I suppose if we connect it all together, the texts were sent using Ripple's phone. At least Snow White got one using Ripple's phone, which means that it would have been easy for Pithy to be the one to send them out. So if Pithy was the one sending them out, Pithy could be working with the old lady that she had at the tea shop with her, who was supposedly a former magical girl. And this old lady could also be the same old lady that brought the pure elements together, making her the Doctor. And it would make sense for her to be a former magical girl because she has to have some way of turning humans into these artificial man-made magical girls. And even, I'm pretty certain, Grimheart said that whoever it was that made them had to have been a former subordinate of hers. So again, that kind of makes sense to work out the mystery in that way, but it could be anything, and I like that we still have that mystery. Next positive, Snow White and Fall. Snow White is an amazing, amazing character. Her growth from the first arc, then being in the background of the next few arcs, and now getting to be a main character once again, and really just feel like a main character. Snow White was amazing throughout the arc, and it wasn't just that she was some main character here who felt like she was going to survive no matter what, but we got to see her psychology and the way that her mind was working, and that really sort of made it perfectly fine that we all knew she was going to survive as a main character. In addition to that, Fall being there to support her, and most of the time we didn't see from her point of view. We saw from Fall's point of view. We saw what he was thinking, what he was feeling, what he was going through, and how he thought that Snow White was feeling, what he thought she was going through, and that was really, really important and cool to see. Next up, I would say the characters in general. I said some characters weren't well developed, but just in general, the cast of characters from Jokers might be the strongest or second strongest from any arc. I don't know, Restart had a really strong cast, but I think that Jokers could be the strongest. Shufflin was amazing, Grimheart was amazing, Snow White was. All of the pure elements had their place, especially Prism Cherry was such a great character. Both Marika and Styler Mimi were incredibly good characters. All of the freelancers were likable, but maybe not developed that much, except Filaru was developed extremely well and was really, really good. So just in general, there were a lot of really good characters. Some, like Umbraid and Lady Proud, or you could argue Kafiri and Utakato, weren't that well developed, but most of them were really well developed and were just really, really good. And leading into the next positive to me is Marika surviving, because, I don't know, like I said, those three characters that seemingly died together, Mimi, Marika, and Prism Cherry, I would have liked to have seen any of those three or all three of those live, so I'm happy that Marika got to survive, and that she can take the development from losing Styler Mimi to grow and move into the future, after having also lost figures from her past, like Cranberry and Malpam and Melville. But yeah, I don't know. Marika surviving I think is very good because, again, it's taking somebody from the Malpam school group to carry on the will of that group, and having one from that group survive really helped, which is why I really feel like one of the freelancers should have survived. That would have probably made the story better. But either way, whatever. So all of that was good. Next up is just, I have in all capital letters, Shufflin. Shufflin was an incredibly scary antagonist. Such a great force of nature type villain where it's just these waves of seemingly unthinking enemies. Shufflin's ability is one of the most creative and sort of complex in the series. Everything about Shufflin as a character is super, super cool, especially toward the end, where we see that she's a very capable strategist, but Grimheart's really holding her back, but at the same time she can't bring herself to disobey Grimheart. So Shufflin's an incredibly nuanced character and a very, very good villain. And then I have in not all capital letters beside it, Grimheart, because Grimheart again is a really well-written villain. She has a cool ability, she has a cool personality and sort of just general character about her. Grimheart's a really, really good villain. Now, they seemingly died at the end, but I'm pretty sure we all know they're not just randomly dying off screen. Shufflin and Grimheart are going to come back in the future. So, yeah, they were just both extremely good villains. And with this arc, I feel like the villains carried the arc. I feel like the entire arc was about Shufflin and Grimheart and how the others are going to survive against them. So really, really good villains, and villains that were able to carry a story. And the next part that's in my positives is that it was just a general good story type. So for the first arc, we got our sort of generic survival game. That's what Unmarked was. It was a normal survival game. Then for Restart, we have more of, it's still a survival game, but it's more like a sort of video game, but if you die in the game, die in real life, and you have to overcome these obstacles within it type of storyline. And then moving into Limited, we got this sort of time trial in bringing in a lot of the sort of political stuff from the Land of Magic and capturing the escaped prisoners type storylines. And then with this, the storyline here was a group trying to survive wave after wave in a hopeless fight against really overwhelming odds and OP enemies. So that was what made the story good, is that it had this feeling of sadness and dread where we just see the main characters getting more beat up each time a wave of Shuffling comes at them, and it's just about them trying to survive when it seems like there is no real good way to survive because they're just getting hit by wave after wave, onslaught after onslaught, and each time, even if they get a small victory, even if they take out some of the Shuffling, they come out of it with more injuries and more of them dead each time. So again, it was a really, really good way to set up the pacing, I guess, too. The way we get to see, okay, here comes another wave of the enemy's attack, and we've lost more characters, and our characters have become more injured, and we just see that over and over again, and we have to see who can make it through this, who can sort of win this battle of attrition. Next part in my positives, kind of two parts discussing the I guess epilogue kind of stuff that came at the end of each chapter, but especially at the epilogue of the last chapter was incredible. I think if you were to ask me my favorite part of this arc to read, it was the last read through. It was the epilogue of the last chapter was probably my favorite part of the entire arc. But Shadowgale is one of my bullet points. Shadowgale is my favorite character. She was at the top of my last favorite character video after I read episodes. I didn't make one after Limited, but I'm making a new one now, and I feel like things might change, but there's a good chance Shadowgale will still be at the top. Her plan and the thing she did at the end with Snow White and giving her the memories was so good. Shadowgale was one of my favorite parts of this, and that leads into my last bullet point, which was that it redeemed a lot of Limited. One of my biggest complaints about Limited is I was like, the characters we got weren't all that good and all that likable, and they even took likable characters from previous arcs like Flea and kind of ruined them by having them just, now she's just evil out of nowhere. But this took her being just evil out of nowhere and it gave it an explanation. She's doing these bad things because she thinks she needs to protect Shadowgale. So Shadowgale says, without me, she won't need to do that, and maybe she can take a look at herself as a person. Or if we screw up her plans, maybe that'll cause her to take a look at herself as a person. But either way, just in general, I think that it really helped Fle's character. And even then, I already liked Nanako-san and Tepsukeme and Mana. I think, yeah, they were 3 of my favorite characters from Limited, but just seeing the stories that we got to see with them took characters that I already liked, that were already some of my favorites in Limited, and made me like them even more. So again, it took things from Limited and made them better. So it fixed some things, and even things it didn't fix that were already alright, it made those things better. So Jokers did not only well as its own arc, but it helped clean up some of the mess of the past arc. And let's see. Yeah, I would say that goes into one of the problems with Limited too, is that 3 of the best characters of the arc died kind of nonsensically at the end. Because if you were to ask me my favorite characters in Limited, like Tepsukeme, Nanako-san, and Mana would all be up there. Especially, I really, really liked Mana while reading. But if you were to ask me my favorite 3 would probably be Wedden, or the most relatable or developed 3. I would say Wedden, Funny Trick, and then 3rd place would be a kind of toss-up between Nanako-san, Tepsukeme, and Kurukuru Hime. So to have Kurukuru Hime, Wedden, and Funny Trick die so nonsensically just at the end like that is kind of a big waste and one of the big problems with Limited to me. But yeah, that was it for my discussion of Jokers. Very few negatives, and even the negatives I had weren't really that bad. They just had to do with the deaths could have been better. They were all right for the most part, but they could have been better. The character development, some of them were really well developed, but some weren't developed that well. Kafiria's magical skill being wasted, and Filuru dying when Filuru probably would have been better off surviving. Again, I'm not going to die on a hill for any of those. They're not really that bad or anything, but I would consider them negatives. And then just a bunch of positives because it was a really good, really fun arc. The story was great. The characters, for the most part, were great. Like I said, this might be the strongest cast of characters from an arc so far. And the biggest thing for me, other than the epilogue stuff that was really good, Snow White's character was so good here. Oh, another thing I didn't even bring up. I really liked that, and I didn't even put it in my notes, I really liked that Stunt Chica was Ripple, but at the same time Stunt Chica was her own person, because Stunt Chica didn't have Ripple's memories, and Ripple got her memories of being Stunt Chica erased. So Stunt Chica was Ripple's physical body, but at the same time, Stunt Chica wasn't Ripple. So I like that. It's a really cool and complex way to write a character. It's almost as if she didn't exist, or she only existed for this arc. Like Stunt Chica is a person that only existed for this arc. So that's really cool. How she wasn't Ripple, she was her own person, but now she's not her own person anymore. Now she's Ripple again, but Ripple doesn't remember being her, so Ripple is Ripple, Stunt Chica, but they're both the same person, even though they're totally different people who don't have memories of each other. So it's really cool the way that that they were able to work that out. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorite concepts in this arc too, that was really good. And in addition to that, the villains being the one to really carry the arc, with Shufflin and Grimheart being possibly the best 2 characters in the arc, and just really being maybe the most developed and pushing the story forward, while the good guy characters were forced to react to it. So yeah, I completely love the arc. And that's it for the video. So like if you did like the video, and be sure to comment down there to tell me what you thought of the arc and what you thought of my thoughts on it, because I'm interested to see what you liked or didn't like as well. Subscribe for more Magical Girl Raising Project, much more on the channel. Like I said, next week's could be a favorite character video, then after that is going to be a oh gosh, losing my train of thought. And then after that, I'm going to do the character reactions. After that, I'm going to start getting into reading Aces. Yeah. So also follow on Twitter if you want. I can try to keep you updated there and stuff for the channel or talk to you there. And if you want a link to our Discord server to talk to me or more of us on Discord, then just ask and I can give you a link. That's it. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.